This video is a 2-hour compilation of the most painful human deaths. From cave explorers who suffered painful deaths all the way to the worst genocides in human history. So let's just get right into it. These group of cave explorers were trapped underwater long enough for the water in the cave to fill up in their lungs, eventually suffocating them to death, with no one being able to hear them scream. And I'm talking about none other than the Golem Cave incident. Okay, so it's August 2005 and 6 young adults from Provo, Utah had dinner and drinks on the night of the 16th. Their names were Steve Hundley, who was 20 years old, Jennifer Galbraith, 21, Ariel Singer, 18, Blake Donner, 24, Scott McDonald, 28, and Joseph Ferguson, 26. For anyone that was curious. And oh, by the way, Jennifer and Blake were students at BYU and were actually dating as well. That night, as they laughed and joked, one of the kids, Jennifer, started talking about the Golem Cave, located in the side of Y Mountain, which was conveniently not too far of a hike from the campus. Quick side note, this cave had actually been mapped out 1 year prior by expert cave explorers. Their names were Spencer Coles and Judd Zimmerman, who made a pretty detailed drawing of the inside of the cave. After playing a 15-minute game of no, you go first, before actually going inside. That's how terrifying this cave was. Now, these kids, who barely even knew how to hike, were going to attempt what 2 experts almost died doing. Get this though, Jennifer actually had been to the cave before, and the group sat around laughing and making fun of her on how last time she'd passed out and became hyperthermic the last time she went through. Listen, I don't know what you guys and your friends, joke about, but I don't think passing out is, that funny. But hey, I guess some of us have a dark sense of humor. Okay, wait, because of this, while ordering another round of drinks, Steve nicknamed it the Cave of Death. Morbidly ironic because they had no idea how right they were. With little to no sleep, the group decided to go up on the mountain to the dangerous cave at 4 in the morning the next day. Steve, who must have had a test in the morning or something, decided not to go. The group of the other 5 friends climbed Y Mountain until they reached the entrance of the cave. Once at the mouth of the cave, the group waited around trying to give each other pep talks to actually enter the Cave of Death. Because this is what the entrance actually looks like. Yeah, inviting, am I right? Well, Joseph probably thought so too, because I think he looked at the group and said something like, "Absolutely the booty butt not." Then popped a squat and cracked open his nice cold beer. Go ahead, I'm good here, I'll be on lookout. But Joseph, hard-headed about this whole idea being stupid, didn't move at all, and just sipped a nice cold one and gave them the finger. Okay. I don't know if it actually went down like that, but all I know is that Joseph didn't enter the cave and was the lookout for the group. At 4:30 in the morning before sunrise, when honestly they probably should have been asleep, Jennifer, her boyfriend Blake, Ariel, and Scott approached the entrance nervously. The entrance was small, about 2 by 4 foot entrance, jagged and a strange kind of angle. Then once inside, the group needed to travel close to 100 feet through the slippery, tight passages, squeezing into a tiny hole in the floor. Yeah, you heard me right. You had to lower yourself into this one person at a time. Oh, no. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't do this either. Who wants to squeeze into an 18 by 24 inch water-filled hole? Oh, now 18 inches is too small, huh? Anyways, it was 4 feet down to another passage completely submerged in water to get to a chamber on the other side of the cave. Now, there was actually a rope that attached to a rock for when they wanted to turn around and head back to the entrance, where our main man Joseph was standing. But as you would expect, it was very hard to find the rope in the dark underwater, and it basically became plastered to all the rocks in the cave from the grime and algae buildup. Oh, and I forgot to mention this horrifying fact. The entrance hole has a dead end 4 feet past the hole on the return trip. And so you don't get confused, this is what I'm talking about. A guy named Brian Lemprey, a previous caver, said that he overshot the exit hole and thought he was for sure going to die. Yep, guys, this cave sounds like a lot of fun. Yippee! Anyways, all 4 of the kids made the tight, completely submerged swim through the pitch black water to the chamber on the other side. They yelled and splashed each other, filled with adrenaline, and just yelled out in excitement. But the cave was finished with their fun, and I guess you can kind of say it was stone cold. Too soon? Okay, before we continue, let me give you boxheads a quick science lesson. The normal oxygen percentage of air you breathe, in the real world is about 20 to 21%. The rest is just nitrogen and carbon dioxide. Alright, so the term hypoxia refers to the brain not receiving enough oxygen despite breathing normally. It can lead to confusion, disorientation, passing out, and eventually death. This can happen at high altitudes where the air is thin or in confined spaces like, the cave, when the oxygen is running out.
Oh, actually funny that you mentioned that because...
Blah, blah, blah is probably what you're thinking right now, but I'm telling you, all of this is going to come in play in about 30 seconds. So the group decided that they wanted to head back through the tunnel and leave the cave because they couldn't actually breathe properly. Jennifer starts her swim back first. She begins the dive, leaving her 3 friends behind, thinking she was going to be laughing with them again in just a few moments. Well, the cave had other plans. Jennifer reaches up for the exit hole, but it's not there. She feels like a rock and then she gasps, which is when Jennifer realizes in horror that she couldn't find her way out. As her lungs start to fill up with water, in her final moments she's scrambling, desperately looking for this damn hole, and suddenly everything went black. Now you're probably thinking that 15 feet isn't much of a swim, but there were 4 of them in a super confined space with limited oxygen. Next up to try and swim back and exit this cave was Ariel. The boys must have known to let the ladies go first or something, I don't know. Ariel spent slightly more time in the cave than Jennifer, so she already couldn't breathe as good, and by the way, Jennifer had already passed out herself in front of them. But remember, it's super dark in this cave, so they don't even know that she passed out yet. Trust me, that's going to be really important in about like 15 seconds. By the way, now the entire group has been in the cave so long, they were starting to exhibit signs of hypoxia, which again leads to disorientation and eventually death if not dealt with immediately. Ariel starts to swim through the pitch black cave as she starts to run out of breath. And she swims straight into the stiff body of Jennifer, who was now completely unconscious, and also blocking the only way out of the damn cave. Ariel frantically tried to push her out of the way, but nothing. Ariel now gasping underwater, scrambling, trying to find a way around her passed out friend. She gasps again, but this time choking down water, and she too then blacked out. Back in the chamber, the 2 boys, now becoming severely hypoxic from the bad air quality, had no idea that the 2 girls in front of them had drowned. And also they had no idea they were blocking the I almost said a bad word. Blocking the exit. Anyways, now Blake was next. And imagine his horror when he found 2 of his friends, one of which was his own girlfriend, drowned and blocking the only way out. Yeah, I get claustrophobic just writing this. He tried to push through them, he slammed his body against theirs, screaming and screaming underwater, trying to force their bodies to move. Behind him came Scott, who suffered the most hypoxia in the chamber alone. Reaches him, but it was far too late. And the 4 friends, unable to move each other's bodies through the tight space, all drowned in the narrow passage, suffering one of the most painful deaths a human could goddamn experience. And guys, at around 5 in the morning on August 17th, 2005, the Golem Cave, or the Cave of Death, would become their tomb. Now hold on, let me take you back outside the cave. Remember our boy Joseph? Yeah, he's still there. And Joseph had been so worried as they've been gone for quite a while now. At around 5:30 a.m. or just an hour after his friends left, he picked up his phone and began calling people who knew about this cave. I'm sure being woken up at 5:30 in the morning by someone asking about a goddamn cave is not annoying at all. Sarcasm, boxheads, it's all sarcasm. Please do not torture me. Anyways, at 6:30 with his friends still not back, Joseph became even more worried. I mean, rightfully so. Where the hell are his friends? I mean, we know what happened, but, think about his spot. The sun was coming up and he was still waiting outside all alone in the cold with none of his friends in sight. Which is when he finally realized that his friends might not be coming back at all. In a hurry, he grabbed his phone and called 911. The police quickly arrived at the scene where they organized a rescue team for the kids inside the cave. Nearly 3 hours had passed since the kids first entered the cave. Knowing this, the cops knew they had to work fast, which is when they began quickly pumping fresh oxygen into the cave. You know, just in case they were alive and running out of air. Next, in order to provide a safe rescue, they began pumping out the water for the rescuers to enter. Once the water level dropped to about 2 feet, they found Jennifer's lifeless body, just floating and cold to touch. It was also soaking wet and cuts on her hands from desperately trying to claw her way out. Another hour later, they found the 3 remaining bodies, in the order of how they were trying to leave. After this whole incident, the cave was then filled up with concrete to prevent anyone else from losing their lives to this cave. Also, memorials have been placed in order to, you know, honor the victims. And now no one else will die in the Cave of Death. Next up is the Nutty Putty Cave incident. A pretty silly name for what trapped a man for 19 hours, eventually killing him. Before we get into that though, I wanted to do something a little bit fun to, you know, brighten up the mood. The least like comment, so the comment with literally no likes on this video will get $10. And I'll choose the winner in 7 days. And the only rule is you have to be subscribed to the channel. The Nutty Putty Cave is a tight, narrow, and slippery maze of passageways located in Utah. It was a twisted, literally, challenge for anyone daring enough to enter. But yet, people still did so. Here is John Edwards Jones, who is 26 years old and actually had lots of caving experience from when he was a kid. At this point of his life, he was studying to become a cardiologist, had recently became a father, and his wife Emily was pregnant with their 2nd child. But unfortunately, he would never get to see her grow up. Yeah, let's just get right into it. On November 24th, 2009, John and his brother Josh were talking about the good old days of splunking with their dad. That's caving for you guys that, you know, don't know. The two then decided to go caving again for the first time in years, and picked the Nutty Putty Cave. But if only John knew what was going to happen to him, he would have never gone inside, I swear. It was 8 p.m. just a few days before Thanksgiving. 9 friends, including John and Josh, grouped up with their caving gear. I'm talking about helmets, lights, ropes, cliff bars, and balls the size of goddamn grapefruits for what they were going to attempt. Ready to explore the inside of this cave. Can I just say that after researching for this video, I will never, ever enter the inside of a goddamn cave. Alright, but let's fast forward a little bit. For about an hour, everything was going smoothly, everyone was laughing and having a good time. Okay, I think this is a good time to explain the whole layout of the Nutty Putty Cave, because it's actually kind of like jaggedy and just confusing. The cave spans a length and depth of 1,355 and 145 feet respectively. Oh, and this boy had many paths, dead ends, and pockets inside. Here on the screen is actually a diagram of the Nutty Putty Cave itself. I mean, look at this. All the names were like strange. I mean, what the hell is a birth canal? Alright, we had enough fun looking at the nut. Let's fast forward a bit to where John, his brother Josh, and 11 others were in the cave. It was around 9 p.m. when the group had explored the biggest room of the cave. This, if you remember from the diagram, is called the Big Slide, located right here. And as you probably guessed, this is where things went from a fun adventure to a deadly nightmare of claustrophobic proportions. And if tight spaces freak you out, you may want to leave the video right now. I warned you. John and his brother Josh, not satisfied with the touristy area of the cave, decided to take up a challenge of passing through what is called the birth canal, the funny name I mentioned earlier. A very tight squeeze that was supposed to open up into a larger room. Noticed how I said supposed to? John, obviously being the older brother, went first. He got on his belly and he crawled through the tight squeeze. Careful not to breathe too fast because, as experienced cavers know, rapid breathing actually expands your chest, making it harder to get through tight spaces. So being all calm is the only way to shrink down small enough to get through these very, very narrow places. And I know, you're probably thinking, hey Boxhead, I'm never gonna do this. Why are you even mentioning it? Well, my fellow, hopefully subscriber, I'm glad you asked. It's all about to make sense, young Padawan. Okay, so remember how we said the birth canal is supposed to push into a larger space? Well, John realized, it's not really doing that. Yeah, instead he was getting more and more restricted. In other words, he couldn't really move much. Barely, or even at all. As the tunnel got smaller and smaller, John started to realize what happened. He may have made a wrong turn. The correct turn was about 50 feet back where he came from. And John, now facing the complete wrong way in a super tight space, couldn't really, turn back. By the way, remember that he was supposed to keep calm or his lungs would expand. And he'll be completely stuck for sure at that point. To show you on the map, the birth canal is right here, and he's supposed to end up somewhere over here, and went the complete wrong way into what is called the Ed's push. And Ed's push does not exactly lead into a larger room. In fact, Ed's push doesn't lead anywhere. Now, I forgot to mention, John is 6 feet tall and about 200 pounds. So in the middle of this tight, space, he can't exactly just turn around. I mean, he's stuck. So John, now starting to get a little bit anxious, tries to make his way further, forward. But again, this is the wrong way and he knows that. Honestly, I think he was just hoping that the cave would expand a little bit so that he could turn around and go the right way. John pushed his way deeper until the worst possible thing ever happened. A very terrified and scared John could no longer move. Not only that, but he found his way into a nearly vertical 10 by 18 inch hole in the cave that was already so narrow you couldn't breathe too hard to get through. Yeah, you heard me. He is now trapped 100 feet in the goddamn ground, upside down, head first, in a solid rock hole and literally cannot move. Holy crap, I would be scared too. Now, all he could do is honestly pray. Somewhere behind him in this path was his brother Josh, who located him and was horrified by how trapped his brother was. Josh tried to free his brother, but he could only inch him slightly, but even that wasn't enough because when he let go, his brother would just slip right back into the hole. I mean, seriously, there was no way he could get his brother out alone. They both said a quick prayer and it was time to rescue this guy. Josh somehow made his way as quick as possible out of the cave, sweating and scrambling but trying to remain calm. Once outside, he called 911 and the rescue mission was about to begin. The first person on the scene was a rescue volunteer named Susan. She pulled up in her little Toyota with the tire screech so loud you could probably hear it inside the cave. She got the gear on and bravely went inside to find John, who, yes, was very much still stuck in the hole. Alright, from here on out, John's in the hole. He didn't move, he didn't escape, he's stuck. Susan reached John and probably said something like, "Hey John, how are you?" Because what else do you really say to a man who's fearing for his life stuck vertically headfirst in the rock? And John, who's looking at her using his feet, says something like, "Thanks for coming, but I really just want to get out." Thank God Susan didn't work for the insurance company or she would have found a way to say, "Sorry, hole removal isn't a part of your policy." Okay, I know it's not time for jokes. I just really wanted to say that. The next few hours were crucial. The rescue team worked through the night coming up with plan after plan. One plan even had them lubing up the walls of the damn cave. I'm sure you boxheads know a thing or two about lubing up. Again, not time for jokes, my bad. Anyways, they eventually decided to use a type of rescue rope that passes through a series of devices that allow the rope to not be caught on any of the cave walls, which can then be used to tie around John's feet. They also brought in a drill. Yeah, that's right, they were going to try and drill away the rock all the way down to him. But after several hours, the drill only got through a few inches of the rock. And to show you what it kind of looks like, here's a real picture of this attempt. The tight squeeze of the cave, as I'm sure you guessed, made things very hard on the rescue team. And even with a very large number of rescue workers and even a helicopter outside, only one person could reach John at once, because that's how small the hole was. Anyways, let's actually go back to John, who, as I mentioned earlier, is still doing his best impression of a goddamn gopher. At this point, he has been upside down, stuck like this for about 19 straight hours. Blood rushing to the brain, organs pressing against each other, and breathing became much, much harder for him. And to make things even worse, he was beginning to hallucinate. Hold on, but the team actually brought a two-way radio so that he could talk to his pregnant wife. Yeah, remember her? The emotional couple didn't know this, but they would be sharing their last moments together over a goddamn walkie-talkie. I know, man, that's just sad. For a moment, things did start to improve and the pulley system was working. And the team started to chant, 1, 2, 3, heave! 1, 2, 3, heave! John was coming loose and the mood started to lift as John ascended from the hole. He was getting closer and closer and everyone could just feel it. He was going to get out. The team literally had blisters. It was so hot and humid in this narrow cave. Everyone was in pain, especially John. But just as they thought they were out of the woods, the worst imaginable thing happened. Suddenly, the entire team fell backwards and the rope just loosened. The rescuer closest to John was hit in the head out of nowhere, and he blacked out. The cave started to fill with dust and the entire team had no idea what the hell just happened.
Report! Report!
They yelled over the walkie-talkies. Nothing.
Man, come the bleep on.
Again, the rescuer closest to John started to open his eyes. He'd just been knocked out. A little bit groggily, he looks around and responds to the radio. Surrounded in the dust and blood rushing down from his face, he looks around and realizes in horror of what just happened. The pulley that was carrying the bulk of John's weight had come loose and shattered the rocks around him, which struck him in the face. And even worse than that, John had fallen even deeper into the hole than where he was before. The rescuer had been knocked out and suffered severe facial injuries. So he could no longer continue, and they switched places with none other than John's father, who was also on the rescue team, being the one who trained John in the first place. When he reached his son, he was horrified that his breathing had slowed down, and John was struggling to stay awake. A rescuer tried to call out to John, but there was no response heard. And guys, no one was to ever hear from John again. After 137 rescuers and 27 hours, a medical professional arrived and crawled into the cave to confirm that in fact on November 25th, 2009, 26-year-old John was in fact dead. The next day, the authorities determined it was too dangerous to retrieve the 26-year-old's body, and the Nutty Putty Cave became the gravesite of John Edward Jones. Just 1 week later after this whole incident, the cave was closed forever, sealed with concrete with the memorial of John where the entrance once stood. Now let's talk about the cave disaster that involved the authorities leaving the bodies of 2 men trapped underwater to rot away at the bottom of a cave. Yup, I saved the craziest story for last, and I'm talking about none other than the Plura Cave disaster. But first, let me give you some background information so you're not confused. Our crew consists of Kai, a 46-year-old electrical contractor, Patrick, a 42-year-old fireman, Yari H, a 40-year-old production manager, Vesa, a 33-year-old electrical designer, and Yari Yu, a 34-year-old mechanical engineer. One day, they packed everything but a goddamn kitchen sink into Yari's van, which is deadass hauling a trailer full of diving gear, a snowmobile, underwater scooters, a metric shit ton of diving cylinders. Basically, it's enough diving gear to make you think that these guys were Navy SEALs or something. Seriously, look at these pictures, it's absolutely nuts. By the time they arrive, it's past 1 in the morning on February 6th. The road has been hard to drive with the van sliding around on the icy highways. Remember, it's wintertime in one of the coldest places in the world. But hey, I guess they made it. Kai kills the engine and the 5 men hop out of the van into the cold air. The plan was complete, what they called a traverse of the Plura Cave, which basically means they were entering through a pond and exiting through a dry but hard to reach, wait, let me try to pronounce this, Stenuflaget, which is the cave's name, and I'm just gonna pop up the word because how in the world did you expect me to pronounce this? Come on, can you even pronounce this? The cave descends over 130 meters, with several tight squeezes and cold as balls water temperatures. And I'm over here huffing and puffing with sadness if my shower runs out of hot water. Kai and Patrick were actually the veterans of the group, having discovered the connection between the 2 entrances and being among the first to ever traverse it. The others had experience in the Plura caves but has never gone this deep in. Yuri Yu just flat out has never been to a cave. Yeah, it was not gonna be a fun time for this young man. Anyways, the group had hashed out the dive details during the long drive. The plan was simple but yet very, very dangerous. Dive through the cave, leave their equipment near the entrance, return the next day and dive back. Sounds simple enough, right? They would all spend the night at the Jordbrew farm and leave their gear to stay, warm in the garage. On the morning of February 6th, Patrick had gone out for a run to check the ice conditions at the pond. The group split up. Kai, Vesa, Yuri Yu carried the equipment to the S cave, while Patrick and Yuri H cut a hole into the ice with a chainsaw. By the way, snow covered everything, but the group was, still in a great mood. There was actually footage shot by Patrick himself that shows the 2 men chatting as they suited up to dive inside this, hole. The water under the ice was crystal clear, revealing a rocky bottom. It was breathtaking. Some would say in more ways than one. Also, it was freezing. but I don't think I needed to tell you that. As Patrick and Yari H slipped into the water, their friends arrived to see them off. They used underwater scooters to save energy, gliding through the ice-cold water like Navy SEALs. Or actual SEALs, I mean, take your pick. Now, it's important to note that they were using what is called rebreathers or closed-circuit systems. The difference is, instead of carbon dioxide being exhaled, it's cycled back into the system, allowing for fewer cylinders. Basically, it allows the divers to go into tighter areas. The rebreather system comes with a computer on the wrist displaying life-saving data of the dive. And I know what you're already thinking. Boxhead, bro, this is like blah blah blah, we get it. But trust me, this is going to be really important. Because rebreathers also entail a larger risk. A lot can actually go wrong. But to keep it simple, if the gases don't mix right, the diver can suffer hypoxia or carbon dioxide poisoning, which hundreds of meters below the surface is not good to say the least. And if you already forgot, confusion, panic, and eventually death is what you're gonna get. So Patrick and Yari H are already ahead of the three others by a couple hours. Splitting up actually made it easier to see because it's pitch black down there and you don't want the sand stirring up. The two men were in complete awe with the beauty of this cave, but their fun was coming to an end. It all went wrong at a sharp 90-degree angle at the near bottom of the dive. Patrick made it around the corner first, a super tight squeeze, but he was fine. Yari H though was not so lucky. Patrick realized that as he was swimming, he wasn't with his partner anymore, so he looks back. The light from Yari's headlamp was moving all over the place, like an underwater rave. Patrick makes the tight squeeze and turns around to see what the problem was, and Yari H reached out to Patrick. He was clearly panicked. He signaled to Patrick to give him the backup tank of bailout gas. He switched between his breather and the bailout gas about 3 times. And obviously I don't need to tell you this, but panicking deep underwater is never good. From here though, things get fuzzy. Patrick reports he handed Yari H the mouthpiece from his cylinder and pressed the purge button. But in his panicked state, Yari inhaled too soon and sucked down cave water instead of the air. Within seconds, it was all over. Patrick watched in horror as his friend drowned right in front of him. Pretty messed up, right? Patrick then looks at his dive computer and realizes that he has to move now, or he might just face the same fate and run out of oxygen. Now, there's this horrible other threat that I completely forgot to mention. Get this, it's called decompression sickness, or the Benz, and I ain't talking about the Mercedes. Basically, the deeper underwater you go, the pressure builds up rapidly. And when you come back up, you need to decompress properly or you will die from nitrogen buildup in your blood. Now get this, each minute at this depth requires 10 minutes in many different stops for proper, recompression. Yeah, there's a lot to think about when you're this deep in the water, or cave, I guess. Well, when you're running out of air, you can't just sit around forever. So back to that dive computer, get this. It read that he would need to be in the water for 7 freaking hours to safely resurface. Holy crap-a-mole, he probably thinks to himself. How long have I been down here? He thinks about the other 3 who had certainly started their dive by now, and we're going to eventually run into Yari H's body, who now blocked the path. He was certain that, his other friends were all gonna die too. But regardless, he had to save himself. So he continued on to the S cave. By the way, it's not actually called the S cave. You know why I'm calling it that, because I can't pronounce the other name. Okay, now the other 3, Vesa, Yari Yu, and Kai, had been diving for a bit now. And they were approaching the site where Yari H's lifeless body was just floating and blocking the path. On their way, Vesa heard something in the distance. It sounded like a distress signal. Vesa approaches slowly. He couldn't really make out what it was. Vesa gasped, like he could not believe what he was seeing. It was the body of Yari H, and the beeping was coming from his breathing gear failing. Patrick was nowhere to be seen. Vesa was starting to freak out, gasping and clutching onto a rock. He knew that he would have to collect himself, or else he was going to end up dead too. He slowly removes his gear, carefully making his way around Yari's dead body. Okay, also, he doesn't know how far behind his other friends were, but all he knew is he needs to get the heck out of this cave right now. Hold on, let's recap. Vesa was ahead of Kai and Yari Yu. Yari H had already drowned, he's packed up, and Patrick had gone ahead to the S cave. So now Vesa made his way around Yari H's body and is just pushed onward onto the S cave. Joining Patrick. Behind him, Kai and Yaryu were struggling as Yaryu got stuck somehow and needed some help. Now, what happened next was unclear as Kai was suffering from nitrogen narcosis and was now very confused. Kai looked around and saw that Yaryu was spazzing out, swapping between his bailout unit and his rebreather. Yaryu hit the sides of the cave walls, kicking and thrashing. I mean, Kai just looked at him and he didn't know what to do. They were so far underwater and the confusion from the nitrogen was just settling in. Kai still looked around, dizzy and unable to do anything. Yari looked at Kai with the horror as water filled his mask. Kai watched as his friend took on water and drowned right before his eyes. Now Kai had to make a very hard choice like the other guys. He could try and risk going with Vesa or turn back around where he came from. The group now had two bodies of their friends between them and were also separated hundreds of meters underwater. Kai thought for a minute. He knew that it was shorter to turn back and, just swim where he came from. And so he decided to save himself and hoped that the others would just be okay on their own. Meanwhile, Vesa pushed forward. Neither of the men knew the fate of the other. They were just trying to save themselves. Kai, now heading back the way he came, was sure that all four of his friends were dead. Low on oxygen, Kai knew that he would have to risk decompression sickness if he was going to have enough oxygen to make it out alive. Vesa obviously thought the same thing as well. They all had run out of time and they would have to face decompression or just flat out die in the cave. Now let's go back to our main man Patrick, who had begun his ascent way earlier, after the death of Yari H, obviously. He surfaced at 9 in the evening, and instead of the planned 5 hours for this dive, it took 8.5 hours. He sat down in the S cave, sure that all of his friends were dead. I mean, imagine that feeling. Just then, Vesa bursted out of the water and Patrick ran over to him, splashing back into the water and gave his friend the biggest hug ever. He was really sure that no one else made it out alive. The two men would never take breathing air for granted again. 3 hours later, on the other end of the cave, Kai returned to where they had chainsawed a hole into the ice, laughing and joking only a few hours before this. Only it wasn't so funny anymore. Kai realized in a horror that the hole had frozen shut. Jesus, hasn't this guy been through enough already? Kai screamed underwater and slammed his hand into the ice, trying to break it, and he was just holding back, sobbing. His joints were on fire from the decompression sickness, and his life flashed before his eyes. Had he come all this way just to die on the surface? Kai closed his eyes and gritted his teeth. He didn't come this far to die under the goddamn ice. With all of his might, he took off the parts of his own gear. The ice cracked a little bit, whack! Almost there, whack! Kai was able to break the ice and he pulled himself up. With over 11 hours underwater, Kai broke out of the ice and took the deepest breath of his life. Finally, he was safe. But back over to the farm, an exhausted Vesa and Patrick got dried and called the authorities. It was near 2 a.m. and they noticed that someone turned the van's lights on. They ran through the snow, yelling and excited to see who made it. Lying on the floor was Kai, who cried tears of joy seeing his other two friends. He really thought, again, that he was the only one who stayed alive. I can't even imagine what they felt on that day. Now, it doesn't stop here. Yes, this story keeps going. The 3 survivors were then all treated for decompression sickness, but there was still one problem that remained. The bodies of their friends were still underwater, trapped at the bottom of the cave. The authorities came up with a plan to retrieve them and called on 3 experienced British divers to carry out the recovery. In February, the recovery team descended through the S cave entrance. When they arrived at the bodies, they couldn't dislodge them and determined it was too dangerous, and decided to leave them there and close the cave forever. But obviously, the men weren't gonna just take the authorities' instructions and leave their friends laying down at the bottom of a goddamn cave. No, these guys decided to plan an illegal dive to recover their friends' bodies so that their families could mourn properly. Man, talk about some good friends. The recovery operation was kept a secret from the authorities, obviously because it was, illegal. Kind of like a heist. If you want to hear more about that, check out my badass heist video right here. Anyways, their illegal plan was to enter the cave from both ends, leaving 26 bailout cylinders within the cave. Yeah, littering was not one of their concerns. Now, Kai and Vesa did not re-enter the cave. Kai suffered severe anxiety as a result from the incident, and honestly, I don't really blame him. Vesa, who had the worst case of decompression sickness of the group, would suffer spinal problems that caused problems even walking. and now was unable to dive ever again. That left Patrick and another diver who was not in the original trip, by the name of Sammy, to retrieve the bodies. The dive began, and only a few hours later, Patrick and Sammy were sad to find the dead bodies, right where they died only a few months before. Patrick and Sammy slowly got their friends out of where they were stuck, wrapped them in cords to the scooter, and made the several-hour swim back up to the surface. The following morning, Sammy called the police to tell them what they did. Now, he was on the phone saying they'd never broken the law and they just wanted to get the bodies out. But also, they needed help transporting the bodies out of the S-Cave. Despite the dive being illegal and drawing tons of media attention, no one was ever charged or even criticized for what they did.
These are some of the worst ways people have died in the ocean. And first up is none other than the Byford dolphin disaster. Okay guys, picture this. It's November 5th, 1983, and 5 people basically explode deep underwater and left one with severe injuries. Yeah, you cannot make this goddamn stuff up. So it's the 1980s and diving technology is getting more advanced. And the North Sea is a hotspot for oil exploration. You know, oil. The reason gas prices go up every time someone sneezes in the Middle East. Anyways, the North Sea was full of oil rigs, and to get that sweet, sweet freedom juice, people had to dive deep. Like, really deep. Enter in the Byford Dolphin, an oil rig with a special tool, a diving system that allowed divers to go way down, gather information, or fix stuff that was broken. Simple enough, right? Now, if you've been watching this channel long enough, you know it's not that simple. By the way, subscribe. Now, the problem with deep sea diving is the pressure. We're talking about crazy, crushing pressure that would literally turn you into a human pancake if you were, well, not in a sealed system. Divers at these depths have to breathe a special gas that prevents their lungs from, exploding. Like, literally. But like we learned in my cave depths video, the transition back to normal air pressure has to be slow. When you're diving, you have to ascend slowly, or you'll get what's known as the bends. It's basically your blood boiling up with nitrogen and, well, killing you. Delightful, wouldn't you agree? But as awful as that sounds, it's not even what killed these men. Wait. Before we get into that, how do you even handle this problem? With the thing that's called saturation diving, which, okay, blah, 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 is what you're probably thinking, when do they explode? Okay, calm down, Jeffrey Dahmer, we're getting there. So basically, they chill in these chambers, do their dives, and when they're done with the job, they slowly, like really slowly, sit in the chamber while it depressurizes to normal over several days. Now, here's where it gets messy. On November 5th, 1983, a team of divers on the Byford Dolphin were finishing up a super long dive. The divers were Edwin Arthur Coward, Roy P. Lucas, Bjorn Giver Bergerson, and Truls Hellevik. They were assisted by 2 dive tenders,
William Cramond and Martin Saunders.
It's cold, wet, and the boys are tired after a long day of whatever it is that humans need to be doing at the most inhospitable place aside from space. They set their gear down, and let out a sigh. I can't wait to go back home and see my mommy. Great, Jimmy, you jinxed us. 4 divers. 2 were near the diving bell, and 2 were in the decompression chamber safely tucked away. And then there were 2 tenders. Nobody, not the chicken kind. Basically, guys on the outside who helped operate the system. Everything was going according to plan. You know, it's a normal day at the office under 9 atmospheres of pressure. Like, no big deal. But wait for it, because this is where things took a massive turn. The chicken tenders? Great, now you got me thinking of chicken tenders. I blame you, Boxhead. The guys were on the outside of the chambers who were supposed to follow this very specific procedure for opening and closing the decompression door, either messed up or rushed it. Unfortunately though, this wasn't one of those oopsie daisies, I dropped my phone in the toilet type of moments. This was one of those I might have just killed a bunch of people type of mistakes. Now imagine for a second, you're in a chamber pressurized to the equivalent of about 9 times the atmospheric pressure. That's a lot, by the way. Okay, wait, think of it as having an elephant sitting on your chest, but you're weirdly okay with it because you've got all the right gear on. Or you're just kinky like that, I don't know. But suddenly, the seal that's keeping the this intense pressure in place breaks open. Yeah, you heard me correctly. It breaks open, and that's when all hell breaks loose, shoddy. In literally 1/10 of a second, the pressure inside the chamber drops to normal atmospheric pressure. Now, if you're a little bit of a slower box and you're not really getting the gravity of the situation, let me break it down. Imagine you're holding a soda can, or for the weirdos, you're holding a pop can, right? You decide to shake it, you open it, and the pressure inside escapes all at once. Except this time, the soda can or pop can is a human body. And instead of fizzy liquid, it's blood, organs, and bones. Yeah. The 3 out of the 4 divers in the decompression chambers were instantly killed. I mean, seriously, their internal organs burst and their bones literally shattered. The rapid decompression caused their bodies to basically explode from the goddamn inside. Now, this next part, I mean, if you've got a weak stomach, maybe take a deep breath, subscribe to Boxhead because it's about to get crazy. One of the divers that died, his name was Truls Hellevik, and he was actually the closest to the open hatch when the accident happened. His body was sucked through a hole less than 2 feet wide. Yeah, you heard me right, a hole 2 feet wide. His remains scattered everywhere. This was like a human blender situation. Reports even say that Hellevik's body was so badly damaged, his spine was ejected from his body. Did you just hear me? His spine out of his body. And what about the 2 guys who weren't in the diving bell? Well, the dive tenders were struck when the diving bell violently flew out of place when the pressure dropped so suddenly. Martin Saunders and William Cramen were both hit hard. The rescue crew rushed into the scene and found both Cramen and Saunders alive and got them both out from under the bell. Unfortunately, the injuries caused by being hit by a 4-ton device are not minor, and Cramen died later, but Saunders, who was found with his body still partially under the 4 tons of steel, suffered a broken neck, back, and collapsed lungs. But he actually did survive the event, if you can even believe that. Now you're probably wondering what caused this. Well, here's the thing. The design of the Byford Dolphin's diving system had a critical flaw. The hatch that was supposed to keep the pressure stable could be opened even if the chambers were still pressurized. It's like building a door with a handle on both sides and being like, what's the worst that can happen? Well, as we now know, the worst that could happen is instant, brutal death. Great. The investigation that followed pointed fingers at both human error and design failure. Turns out, the guy operating the system that day might have been a little bit too eager, or maybe just didn't realize how sensitive this whole thing was. It wasn't exactly clear, but yes, that one simple action costed the lives of 5 goddamn people. Alright, so now we're diving into... I just realized that sounded bad. Into one of the most wacky and stupid modern deep sea disasters. One that you totally saw all of the memes for. Remember the Logitech controller? And we're talking about OceanGate's Titan. If you never heard of it, how's the rock you're living under, buddy? Well, a lot of people think that these rich people deserve to die horribly, and I can't say anyone deserves this, but buckle up because this story right here is like an underfunded sci-fi horror film. Now, let me give you guys some context. OceanGate is a private company, and they're the ones behind this whole mess. They had one goal: steal the money from rich people with a hole in their pocket. It was really to offer the rich people the chance to dive all the way down to the wreckage of the Titanic. Yeah, because apparently paying $250,000 per ticket to go look at an old boat that's over 12,000 feet below the ocean is like the ultimate flex or something. I mean, I think being subscribed to Boxhead's a bigger one, but whatever. So here's the deal. OceanGate had this shiny high-tech sub called the Titan. Or at least they wanted you to think that it was high-tech. In reality, it was a bit more DIY than you'd expect for something going 2.5 miles beneath the ocean. I mean, these guys were using trash equipment, including a literal video game controller to steer the whole damn thing. Yeah, you heard me correctly. Look at this. Because when you're spending $250,000 to visit one of the deepest parts of the ocean, nothing says confidence like knowing your life depends on a piece of shit you could probably buy at Best Buy. Now, OceanGate had been doing these Titanic dives for a while, but it wasn't exactly smooth sailing. There were rumors in the diving community that maybe, just maybe, this sub wasn't as safe as it should be. Specifically, some experts raised concerns about the Titan's carbon fiber hull, a material that's not exactly known for holding up under extreme pressure. But of course, the company just brushed these concerns aside. I mean, why listen to the experts when you've got a money printer to run? Right? Fast forward to June 2023, OceanGate sets out with 5 people on board the Titan. Shahzada Dawood, a Pakistani-British businessman. Suleiman Dawood, Shahzada's 19-year-old son. Hamish Harding, a British billionaire and explorer. Paul-Henri Nargeolet, a renowned French deep-sea explorer and Titanic expert. And who could have forgot the man of the hour, Stockton Rush, the CEO of OceanGate himself? Yeah, that's right, the guy in charge of this whole operation. He was taking a joyride on his own sub. Bold move, am I right? Anyways, the Titan starts its descent all the way down to the Titanic wreck site. Everything seems fine at first. I mean, they're about an hour and 45 minutes into the dive when, boom, communication with the surface just stops. Hey guys, don't you just love being rich?
It's pretty great.
Radio silence. Now, if you're thinking, oh, maybe their radio actually just broke. First, that's some wishful thinking, but what actually happened, it was way worse. So the sub is about 2.5 miles underwater, facing over 6,000 pounds of pressure per square inch. That's like having the weight of an airplane pressing on every square inch of your goddamn body. If even the tiniest part of the sub's hull fails, the whole thing collapses in on itself faster than you can even blink. And when I say faster than you can blink, I mean literally. The sub started making strange noises, which is obviously not a great sign. Then suddenly, crack! The sub imploded from tiny but catastrophic flaws in the design of the sub. In milliseconds, with the force so powerful, it turned the entire thing into a pile of debris in a blink of an eye, killing everyone on board instantly. Yeah, it's horrifying to think about. 1 second, the people inside are staring into the deep abyss, probably thinking, how cool it would be to brag about their dive, and next, they're just gone. The pressure down there doesn't mess around, it's a total, instant destruction. So now we got a missing sub, no communication, and no clear idea of what went wrong. At least not right away. The search begins. I mean, it's not exactly easy to find something that small in the vast dark ocean floor, and the clock is goddamn ticking. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. People were glued to the news, all acting differently. Some hoping for a miracle, some memeing on the company, and some making fun of the victims. 4 days into the search, debris is finally found near the Titanic wreck. And when I say debris, I'm talking about small pieces of what was once the Titan sub. Okay, so while I'm recording this, I'm looking on Twitter, or X for the weirdos that call it that. There's actually new footage of what was found. Here, take a look at this. Yeah, you've probably been wondering, was there any chance of survival? Let's just say, not a chance in goddamn hell. Now, here's where things get even more frustrating. Remember those concerns that experts had about the Titan's design? Yeah, it turns out that they were 100% right. There were warnings from former employees, industry professionals, and engineers who had all said the same thing. The Titan was not fit for these type of deep dives. But OceanGate, and particularly its CEO, Stockton Rush, just brushed it all off. Rush even went on record saying that regulations and safety standards were holding back innovation. That's right, he thought that being safe was too restrictive. All right. Do you want to know something crazy? An OceanGate whistleblower, David Lockridge, the OceanGate's ex-director of marine operations, even said, and I quote, "The whole idea behind the company was to make money and that's it." Now, hold on. You're probably thinking, how the hell do I know if I'm getting the full picture and David actually said this about OceanGate? Because come on, we all know some news articles from some companies CNN can lie and manipulate the truth, or simply leave out really important information about what is really going on in the world to serve their, own agenda. Which is why, ladies and boxheads, I always think that you should be cross-checking the information you read with other sources just to make sure it's not a whole lot of baloney. Luckily for you, dummy, I made it very easy for you with today's sponsor, Ground News, which I actually use to make these videos itself. Basically, they're an app and website that gathers related news articles from around the world to create super comprehensive story overviews. Like this one on David Lockridge testifying, claiming the company sent him a threatening letter after he complained to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. And get this summary is based on all the articles Ground News found covering the story. And hold on, I personally think this part is cool. You can dive deeper and compare the coverage with context on each source's political lean, credibility, and who actually owns them. You ain't getting me this time, CNN. This is all really important to know so we can see what type of agendas are influencing their reporting. I know I've been dogging on CNN, but they are not gonna like this one. Because unlike them, Ground News isn't telling you what to think. They're showing you all the information so you can fully understand what's happening and make up your own mind about it. Remember people, think outside the box. Anyways, to top it all off, Ground News is independent, nonpartisan, and does not use any ads on their platform, so they stay as objective as possible. So if you would like to join a platform working to make the media landscape more transparent, then head over to groundnews.com/box and save 40% on the same unlimited access Vantage plan that I use. Remember guys, stay informed, stay critical, and stay grounded. Thanks to our beautiful sponsor, Ground News. I love you guys.
I mean, think about it for a second. You're designing a sub to go down one of the most dangerous places on Earth, and you're choosing to cut corners because you think that safety's overrated? Bold strategy, but let's just see how that plays out. Oh wait, we already did. So after the wreckage was found, the investigation began. People were goddamn livid. Lawsuits were flying left and right, families were devastated, and the media went into override, dissecting every decision OceanGate had ever made. There were even theories that the OceanGate sub failure was used as a way to divert public attention from other more important things. But it's just more likely that the masses attached to these type of stories more than political mumbo jumbo. The biggest takeaway is that this wasn't some unforeseeable freak accident. It was a tragedy that could have been avoided if, they just followed some basic engineering safety protocols. I keep saying sounds messed up, right? Well, that's because it actually goddamn was. Next up, we have 5 dudes who got stuck in a tube and the company didn't even try to save them. And we're talking about the Peria Fuel Trading Company diving tragedy. It's February 25th, 2022, around 3 p.m. And 5 experienced divers are about to carry out what was supposed to be a standard repair on an oil pipeline. The pipeline ran between what was called Berth 6 and Berth 5, transporting, of course, the oil. Well, it was supposed to be dormant, meaning it was not running at the moment. Only this time, what no one bothered to tell the divers was that nearly a month earlier, Peria Fuel Trading had cleared oil from the pipe, creating a differential pressure situation. What's that, you may ask? Oh, it's just a fancy way of saying they turned the pipeline into a giant ocean vacuum from goddamn hell, ready to suck anything that got close. So the divers approached their target. They get out their tools and start wrenching. Bubbles start coming up. That's not supposed to. Suddenly, a massive vortex comes up from the pipe. And hold on, we're not talking about a gentle tug, like getting pulled into a wave. This was more like getting yanked into a goddamn black hole. And now, the divers are trapped in an oil pipe. The GoPro footage was recovered from Kazim Ali Jr., one of the divers. The audio recording is just the last thing anyone would want to hear. Gasping, praying. 5 men, alive, stuck in the pipe, deep underwater, unable to move, walls on all sides, comforting each other as they realize their chances of survival are slipping away with each passing moment. It's literally haunting. Out of the 5 divers, only one, Christopher Boudreau, managed to escape, and it wasn't some miraculous fluke either. This guy literally crawled his way out of the pipeline for 3 hours just so he could survive. Christopher managed to escape by relying on his diving skills and mental determination, people. After, again, being trapped for literally 3 hours, he found a way to climb out of the pipeline by following the air pockets that had formed inside. He couldn't see and had to use air pockets to climb. It's really just insane to think about.
You have to be strong, mentally strong to survive this. I make a decision to save my life. I did everything in my power, is what he said to the commission investigating the incident. Anyways, using his last reserves of strength, he slowly navigated through the confined, dark space. Eventually, with little energy left, he surfaced, and to his relief, a rescue team picked him up. Unfortunately, despite his efforts, the other divers, including Kazim Ali Jr., were not able to escape and tragically died inside the pipeline. 3 hours of pure nightmare fuel. And here, I'm getting frustrated when my Wi-Fi cuts out for a few minutes. But yeah, hold on. It gets worse. Turns out, Peria didn't just mess up with the whole pressure situation. Oh, no. When the diving community was ready to launch a rescue mission for these guys, Peria straight up refused. Yup, ladies and boxheads, they blocked rescue attempts, saying that they had no legal responsibility to save these men. I mean, what kind of company just throws its hands in the air and says, "No, not our problem"? Well, apparently everyone, Peria does. Peria was grossly negligent. Oh, and by the way, when Peria's terminal operations manager, Colin Piper, was asked why they didn't let anyone rescue the trapped divers, he said it was to prevent more deaths. Quick question here, is that really the best you could have came up with? I mean, come on. The report found that he wasted precious time waiting for a camera drone to show images from inside the pipe. Meanwhile, his men were down there, trapped in air pockets, running out of oxygen. Now imagine that. You're stuck inside an oil pipeline, praying that someone's going to save you, but the guy in charge is waiting for a camera to tell him what he already knows. And instead of consulting the best commercial divers on site, he just does nothing, making the only survivor say this to himself.
Everything inside me was hoping a rescue was going on. Nobody was making an attempt to rescue me.
Boudram, the lone survivor, hasn't been able to return to diving since the accident, and honestly, can you really blame him? The trauma of watching his colleagues die and barely escaping himself would make anyone rethink their career choice. But the real kicker, he's doubtful that Peria will ever even face real justice. And let's just say, after seeing how things played out, he might not be wrong. The Sewol Ferry Accident. It's April 16th, 2014. The Sewol Ferry is cruising from Incheon to Jeju Island in South Korea. It's quite a popular route, a bit like hopping on a Greyhound bus, except over the ocean. On board are over 450 passengers. Most of them are high school students heading out on what should have been a fun field trip. Yeah, I know. Nothing sets the scene for a tragic disaster like a bunch of kids just trying to enjoy their day. The weather's fine, the sea's calm, and everything seems normal. But underneath the surface, things were already going wrong.
You see, the Sewol wasn't exactly the safest ship to begin with.
It had been modified to carry more cargo than it was actually designed for. Over 2 times as much, which made it dangerously top-heavy. Now, you would think that someone would have caught on to that, right? But no, because profits, as it usually goes, were more important than passenger safety. So, at around 8:49 a.m., the ferry starts to tilt. And I'm not talking about a gentle sway in the ocean breeze. I'm talking about a sharp turn that throws the whole ship off balance. The cargo wasn't properly secured. And as it tilted, the ferry began to capsize, which means tip over. Yeah, not exactly what you want to hear when you're trapped in a floating death trap. Many 911 calls went out, and obviously they were speaking Korean. But the translations were heartbreaking. Children barely starting their lives shouting, "Save us, we're on the ferry and I think it's sinking. The ferry is tilted and we can't move." Now you've probably been wondering, so where's the crew in all this? Surely they had a plan. Well, let's just say not exactly. In fact, the crew's response to this crisis is where things go from bad to utterly infuriating. First off, the captain Lee Jun-so wasn't even in the wheelhouse when the ship started to sink. He was in his cabin, leaving an unexperienced third mate in charge. Isn't the captain's one job to drive the goddamn boat? Oh, I forgot to mention the captain was one of the first people to abandon the ship. Yeah, you heard me right. He threw on his civilian clothes, disguised himself as a passenger, and jumped ship, leaving hundreds of people behind. Talk about leading by example. idiot. And if that wasn't bad enough, the crew actually told the passengers to stay put. They instructed everyone to remain calm in their cabins, assuring them that everything would be fine. I mean, stay in your rooms as the boat is literally tipping over. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Some passengers obviously ignored them and were rescued. Good for them. Sometimes the experts do not need to be trusted. I'm kidding, don't make this political. By the time passengers realized the severity of the situation, it was too late. The ferry was already sinking fast. So while the captain and most of the crew were already safely aboard rescue boats, hundreds of passengers were still trapped inside the sinking ferry. And these weren't just any passengers. Most of them were teenagers who were following orders, sitting tight in their rooms as water flooded the ship. Like, come on, imagine that you're a kid on a field trip, sitting in a cabin with your friends, listening to the crew, thinking that help is coming. But instead, the ship is sinking, the water's rising, and no one is coming to save you. Now, the rescue operation, well, that was another disaster. It took the South Korean Coast Guard way too damn long to respond. And when they did arrive, their efforts were uncoordinated and ineffective. I mean, this is what the ship looked like. There were helicopters, boats, divers, all things you would expect in a rescue, but it was a chaotic mess. No one was communicating where to be and what to do. Meanwhile, the passengers are trapped inside, slowly drowning while their lives could have been saved if the response had been quicker and more coordinated. And Boxheads, it gets worse. Out of the 476 people on board, 304 lost their lives. Of those, 250 were high school students. Oh, let that sink in. An entire generation of kids wiped out because of greed, incompetence, and a total failure of leadership. As you would expect, the public was outraged, and rightfully so. The South Korean government came under fire for their mishandling of the rescue efforts
and the corruption that allowed the Saewol to operate in such a dangerous condition in the first place.
The captain and several crew members were put on trial. Captain Lee Jun-so, he was sentenced to life in prison for murder through gross negligence. Yeah, sounds like the least they could do for a guy who abandoned a ship and let hundreds of people die. The rest of the crew faced various sentences, but honestly, the damage was already done.
We're diving into caves where the people who went into them died horribly. This first one is actually not that known, and it's the Ellison's Cave tragedy. Only a few hours from the cave is the University of Florida in Gainesville. And 10 students went up to the cave on February 12th, 2011. Because hey, who needs a beer and partying in a college town in Gainesville when you could just go sit in a rock tube? I seriously don't get people. The group consisted of 5 boys and 5 girls. 2 of which were Grant Lockenbach, who was 20, and Michael Peary, who was 18 years old, who would never come out of the cave again. Another fun fact you should probably know about this cave, it's considered the deepest cave in the US. With the pit so deep, they call it the Fantastic Pit, and it's almost 600 feet deep. Kinda like your girlfriend after she hangs out with the guy she told you not to worry about. Sorry, Boxheads, someone had to tell you. Anyways, the group parks the car at the base of the mountain, and by the way, Ellison's Cave is located in Georgia, USA, and it is over 12 miles long. You could absolutely never convince me to get into one of these things after I researched this goddamn story. They're probably thinking to themselves, let's set our iPhone 4s down and really live in the moment. Hashtag live, laugh, love. Hashtag who needs emergency equipment. Hashtag subscribe to Boxhead. They didn't say that. And went up to the mountain towards the cave with what my mother would say is nothing on. It's February in the Appalachian Mountains. It's pretty damn cold. The group of 10 got to the cave entrance and looked at each other with suspense and thought what every college kid thinks when they're about to enter a really deep hole. Man, I should have brought some protection. But they went in without it anyways. The cave, I mean. The 10 college kids made their way deeper into the cave with every step sipping their little water. And someone totally said, guys, isn't it kind of nice we don't have our phones? Bro, I know, I feel like so zen right now. Bro, you dropped the bag. Bro, the girls are watching. I'll get it. Dude, that's a giant pit, what are you even doing? It's for the Vine, bruh. I can already see the comments. Actually, this was 2011 and Vine was only released in 2013. Yeah, so the bag fell into a pit called the warm-up pit, which was around 125 feet deep. There was a large
freezing waterfall that would soon make things very difficult. After the bag had fallen, the group wanted to turn back, probably thinking, let's go get some beers, this is stupid. But our guy Grant insisted on going down to get it so that they could, continue. But as he descended deeper and deeper, he started to shiver as he got closer to the giant waterfall. The water is freezing. Okay, fine. Not literally, but the water in that cave only ranges between 32 and 55 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty cold. As his body inched down the rope, he found himself getting closer and closer to the waterfall, slowly moving down. He tried to avoid the cold water by swinging away, but that caused him to get tangled in his own ropes. And he just hung there, slowly moving down into the water. As the freezing water rushed over him, Grant screamed for help. And Michael, a hero friend, got his harness on, and down he went after him. The harness zipped Michael down, and as he got closer, he tried to help Grant get free of the water. Yank, pull, and right there, ladies and boxheads, is where everything got even worse. The rope twisted around Michael too. See, remember, they're on the same rope. The roaring water dragged at the rope, pulling it tighter and made both of them even more tangled. And shortly after Michael got down there, it dragged him too under the water. And guys, by this point, Grant was barely conscious. Alright, so once Michael started freaking out, a few friends above decided, let's call for some help, and rushed down the mountain to where they parked their cars.
911, what's your emergency?
My friends are stuck in the goddamn cave. Please send help. The authorities were called at 2:19 p.m. and they rushed over to the scene to hopefully help Grant and Michael. Move. The rescuers climbed down the cave walls and made their way to the scene where both Grant and Michael were tangled. They attached pulleys and went down to rescue them, praying it wasn't too late. But at 3:30, when the rescue team recovered their cold, stiff, pulseless bodies, they had already known that they had both died from hypothermia. The cave had echoes of the crying friends mourning the loss of the two boys. Shortly after the tragic loss, the University of Florida held a candlelight vigil for the loss of the students. By the way, they were both academic scholars and well-loved among their friends. The families mourned the loss of their boys, and the others in the cave would hold that memory forever. Now, this next guy was the same age as the last two, and he too would be stuck in a cave, but this time his body would never leave. This is the tragedy of Neil Moss. Neil Moss was an undergraduate student at Balliol, Oxford, which means he was a pretty smarty pants, really thinking outside the box, Which means, of course, we love him. It's March 22nd, 1959, and 8 people make their way into Peak Caverns in Derbyshire. God, the British really know how to make things sound like a full of goddamn crumpets, don't they? Anyways, there was this newly discovered vertical shaft that no one had been down before. And that shaft looked pretty goddamn big. That's what she said. God, I'm like 5 years old. The group of 8 people were cavers from let me check my notes here. The British Speleological Association. Sure, bro. You're climbing into caves, yet you name it as if you guys are gonna fill out that shit on some royal tax form. Like, hello? So yeah, they found this new shaft, and it was guessed that the depth of the shaft would be around like 40 feet, but they lowered to around 75 feet just to be sure. Moss kicked the ladder down the hole. The ladder dropped down and disappeared into the depths below. Oh, wetty boys, time to make some history, he probably said as he dropped in. One step at a time, Moss lowered himself into the vertical passage. There was a boulder that seemed to be blocking the way, and he tried to kick it out of the way, but then the worst possible thing happened. His body became trapped in a space just 18 inches wide. I'm stuck, he probably yelled. The group quickly tried to help him. They lowered ropes down. He would wrap them around himself and they would pull. They tried this over and over again, and each time the ropes would either tear or he wouldn't even move at all. And not to mention, well, I mean, this is the case for a lot of these stories we cover, but air quickly became a problem. See, this was a shaft that was about 40 feet vertical, and Neil's body made a better door than a window in regards to airflow. So the air down there was getting thin, or worse, polluted, with dust and other shit that goes down a shaft.
As Neil was breathing in this air, he started becoming delirious and not at all aware of the danger he was in. Hey, you guys go out to eat. I'm fine here, he called. Like, imagine being 40 feet down in a rock tube and telling your only hope of rescue, go, have some brewskis while you're just sitting there dying. Like, guys, this is clearly carbon monoxide poisoning. Oh, you don't know what that is, huh? Well, clearly you didn't watch my other videos because, fine, I'll forgive you. It's basically when your brain isn't getting enough oxygen and you start acting like a goddamn fool. So yes, Neil has seen better days. Let's just call rescue. Breathe and get your tea out your ass. It's 1959 and the iPhone hasn't even been invented yet. We can't use the goddamn telly. Alright. So someone had to find the old telly and get someone to get this sorry son of a gun out of a goddamn rock hole. Wee woo, wee woo, wee woo. The ambulances and a bunch of volunteers rushed over to get this man out of the hole. They have tanks of oxygen, ropes, and a load of presumably some tea. But anyone who was lowering themselves into this cave quickly came back up because of the foul air. Okay, so it's now early in the morning on day 2, and the bad air drove back up more and more attempts to get him out. And the bad air was getting seriously bad. I mean, there were so many attempts to try and get him, but they seriously just kept coming back up. They tried over and over again to try to get this oxygen into the hole, but it never seemed to be enough. Of those who tried, there was a very brave girl at 18 years old. Her name was June Bailey, who was small enough to get to him, but quickly realized that she was becoming hypoxic by, going lower. So by now, he's been in this goddamn hole stuck for over 24 hours. But everyone that was trying to help felt like they couldn't give up. His father was weeping at the cave entrance, never did enter the cave, but seriously, he couldn't bear to see his son in that state. His breathing could still be heard. They knew he was still down there alive, but then the rain came down harder and harder. All personnel for your safety until the rain stops to stand down. That was the final order. The rain might have flooded the cavern and caused even more problems. The group retreated, and they waited. When the rain finally stopped, the group made their way back to the cave and just listened. Just nothing. Pure silence. At that very instance, the doctors determined a time of death of around 3 a.m. on Tuesday, March 24th. The doctors said that it was their first time giving a time of death without actually seeing the patient. Eric Moss, his father, broke down in tears, and he actually requested that they stop the rescue so that no more lives were lost in this cave. They decided later to seal the shaft, trapping his body there forever. And hold on, they renamed it from the Stalagmite Chamber in Peak Caverns to the Moss Chamber in his honor. And guys, look, I saved the most painful cave death for last. Everyone meet Floyd Collins, who was born in 1887. Floyd wasn't just content with f***ing around underground for fun. No, he had bigger plans. Okay, caving was kind of like the NFT of Kentucky back then. Basically, he wanted to find a cave so impressive, so spectacular that people would actually pay to walk through it. Yeah, this was a time when charging people to see holes in the ground was a viable business plan. Floyd's great idea was Sand Cave, a part of the Mammoth Cave system in Kentucky, which, by the way, was one of the largest cave systems in the whole goddamn world. Mammoth Cave was already a big deal, tourists loved it, but Floyd, being the ambitious little guy that he was, thought that Sand Cave would be his big breakthrough. No, dude, seriously, this guy died trying to be a 1920s YouTuber. This shit is absolutely wild. So it's January 30th, 1925, and Floyd decides, let me head to the Sand Cave on a solo mission. Just him, a lantern, and his wild dreams of fame and fortune. Buddy, you're not box-head, little man. Anyways, he squeezes through a few tight passages, inch by inch, because apparently that was a definition of a good time back then. Now, when I say tight, nope. Nope. I am not going to say it. I'm putting my foot down. The jokes in this video have gone too goddamn far. We're talking spaces where you can't even turn your head without scraping it on the goddamn walls. If you're even slightly claustrophobic, this would be your worst nightmare, and I recommend you click off the video right now. Now, I can't click off the video because obviously it's my video, but miss me with that bullshit. But not for Floyd. Nah, this guy's a committed man. He's making his way deeper and deeper into this cave. He finally finds what looks like a promising spot, and of course Floyd, being the adventurer he was, figures,
What's the worst that can happen, guys? And starts lowering himself. One step at a time, Floyd shimmies his way down this 55-foot deep vertical shaft. And probably thinking to himself while he's going down, this is it. I'm about to be rich. Just when Floyd's about halfway down, out of nowhere, a 26-pound rock comes loose from the ceiling. Now, it doesn't sound like that big of a deal, right? 26-pound rock, boy, I'm bench pressing that. You feel me? Anyways, this rock decides it's going to sit itself right on top of Floyd's left leg, pinning him against the narrow cave wall. Floyd's not just stuck. This man is super duper stuck. And before you think, you stupid boxhead, he could have just pushed the rock off. Let me stop you right there, mister. Remember, this passage is so tight that Floyd could barely move his arms, let alone reposition himself. So he wasn't just trapped, he was goddamn profanity, boy. YouTube, I'm sorry. But he's already deep underground and his family knew that he'd gone caving, but it wasn't until hours later that his brother, Homer Collins, realized that something might have been off. Homer goes to go check on Floyd and finds that Floyd is in the worst possible position. Floyd was wedged in there like a goddamn human cork in a wine bottle. They tried ropes, pulleys, brute strength, but each time the ropes would break or Floyd wouldn't even budge an inch. Like, guys, imagine the frustration of trying to pull a grown man out of a narrow hole in the ground using nothing but ropes. It's like trying to pull a couch up a goddamn spiral staircase, buddy. It's not happening. So, our guy Homer calls for help. And of course, word gets out, and in 1925, when word gets out, it really got out. Like, Floyd was the Hawk-Tuah girl of his time. And before you knew it, every journalist and their grandmother is flocking to Butt, Kentucky to cover this tragedy. By February 1st, Floyd being stuck in the hole was national news. Reporters were showing up with cameras, notepads, and a disturbing level of enthusiasm for a man trapped underground who might die. Eventually, thousands of hats were gathered around the cave to watch what exactly, I don't know. The dude stuck in a goddamn hole, like, what are they looking at? Guys, I'm being so serious about this. Vendors would set up food stands, locals sold souvenirs, and tourists treated the whole thing like some goddamn twisted carnival. Meanwhile, Floyd, yeah, he was still stuck in the hole. By now, professional rescue teams had arrived, armed with all kinds of gear. Motorized winches, oxygen tanks, and enough rope to make a Boy Scout goddamn proud. Problem was, the cave wasn't cooperating. I mean, it's a rock hole. I don't know what they wanted from it. Every time they tried to pull Floyd out, more dirt and more rocks would just collapse onto him, making the situation even worse and more painful. The passage was just too tight, too unstable. Meanwhile, Floyd's condition was getting worse and worse. He was cold, exhausted, and started losing hope. They tried sending Floyd food and water through tubes, along with, of all things, whiskey. Yeah, guys, I mean, because you're trapped underground with no way out, I mean, you might as well have a goddamn drink, right? Despite their best efforts, though, nothing seemed to work. And Floyd was hanging on by a goddamn thread. The lack of oxygen was starting to become a problem, as it, tends to be for humans. He was becoming delirious, and at one point, he supposedly called up to the rescuers saying that he was ready to go to heaven. Yikes. As Floyd's condition deteriorated, the rescuers decided to change their tactics. Instead of trying to pull him straight out, they came up with this new idea. Dig a tunnel into the side of the cave and reach him that way. Yeah, it sounded brilliant on paper, but in reality, not so much. The cave was way too unstable, and every time they dug, more debris would fall, and days turned into weeks, and it became more and more clear that they were racing against time. But they kept digging. They dug through the rock, the mud, and anything else in their way, hoping that somehow they could reach Floyd before it was too late. Fast forward to February 16th, and it has nearly been 14 days since Floyd first got stuck. The rescue team had finally broken through their tunnel, but guys, it was too late. Floyd had died from exposure, starvation, and hypoxia. Or in simpler terms, he was stuck in a fucking hole for 2 weeks. He was found in the same exact spot he'd been since day one, trapped beneath that 26-pound rock deep underground. When the rescue team finally reached him, there was nothing left to do but declare him dead. Now, guys, the official time of death was estimated to be around 3 a.m. on February 13th, but no one really knows for sure. And here's where things take an even wilder turn. Oh, did you think we were done? After Floyd's death, the rescuers had to make a tough call. They decided to leave his body in the cave because they couldn't risk any more lives trying to pull him out.
So they sealed up the passage, leaving him in the place that he had hoped would bring him so much fame and fortune. Oh, wait. Did you think everyone listened to the rules? No. Months later, a team including Floyd's brother Homer finally managed to retrieve Floyd's body. They were able to bury him, and you would think that all is well. Well, of course, until they found out that the property was actually sold to a dentist named Dr. Harry Thomas, who, hold on, dug up the body and put the body back into the cave on display in a goddamn glass coffin. Woo! Did you think we were done? His body was then stolen. Yes, stolen from the coffin and then yeeted into some bushes. His body was found with his left leg missing. And then his body was put into another coffin back inside the cave, until his family pleaded and pleaded with the National Park Service to, not have this man's body be a goddamn tourist attraction. Fine, they said, and you'll be happy to know that Floyd is no longer in the cave. Alright guys, let's talk about some of the most painful executions in human history. The first execution is one where a man was forced to watch his own brother get slaughtered right in front of him, before being sent to the grave his damn self. Yeah, sounds pretty messed up, right? Well, this story gets a lot more fun than that, but first let me give you like 1 to 2 minutes of background information so you actually understand why they made this specific execution so painful. Let me take you back to the year 1514 to meet this man Gregory Doza, who at the time was a cavalry captain for what is now Belgrade. Basically, how the story goes is that one day some random Hungarian chancellor ordered Doza to assemble an army to defeat the Ottomans, which is, the Ottoman Empire. And being the good boy Doza is, he assembled an army of 40,000 soldiers to fight those bad boys. Quick side note that's actually going to be really important in about 30 seconds. These soldiers were actually just peasants of the empire that this dude just rounded up to fight for him. Let's just say I don't think these peasants were fighting willingly, because Doza forced them to go into war without giving them food, clothing, or even weapons. I mean, this dude was literally sending people to the damn slaughterhouse. So how were the peasants just okay with it is probably what you're thinking. Well, that's because the peasants actually teamed up to revolt against their own empire, instead of fighting the Ottomans, like they were supposed to. Who doesn't love a good betrayal story? I mean, our man Doza sure does love them, because instead of fighting against the peasants, like he should have, he decided to jump ship and join the peasants in their rebellion against the Hungarian Empire. Are you starting to see where, some people might have wanted to see him executed? Yeah. When Gregory Doza was eventually captured, the Hungarians made sure to get their revenge, because the execution that they came up with was so brutal, so painful that it's almost just beautiful. First, they took Mr. Gregory and stripped him booty butt naked. Then they forced him to sit on a steaming red-hot iron throne. Okay, I mean, picture sitting on a steel bench when it's 90 degrees outside. Now imagine that, but 1,000 times hotter. Yeah. Oh, and they also made him wear a burning hot crown on his head and made him hold an equally hot scepter as well. Oddly specific, don't you think? The reason for that was actually to mock his royal ambition, because, the guy's a traitor. Here's where things got so creative, even I was impressed while researching this story. While Doza was getting his skin burnt by the throne, crown, and scepter, these dudes went out and captured his younger brother, then hacked him to death right in front of Doza. Wait, hold on, it doesn't stop there. Because after they slaughtered his brother, they would take pliers, heat it up with a fire, and start tearing Doza's flesh right off of him. Oh, and you remember the peasants that got him into this mess? Well, they were captured and starved for days before the Hungarians forced them to bite off and swallow Doza's flesh where the pliers had cooked it. What if they didn't want to? Well, I'm glad you asked, because if the peasants didn't eat his flesh, then they were just sliced into many, many pieces. So, like you would expect, the peasants who were not dead started gobbling up his flesh. Then after there was no more skin to eat, the Hungarians just got bored of hearing the man scream out in pain. So they just cooked him to death on the throne. Now, how can an execution get even more painful than that? Well, let me tell you about the execution of Peter Neers. I personally love this story because this dude Peter was an absolute freak. Like, seriously. Okay, imagine if Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy had a kid. That's essentially who Peter Neers was. Basically, Neers was a man in I don't know how to say this, I'm gonna pop it up on the screen, who went around and murdered local citizens. How many people did Neers kill exactly? Well, no one at the time actually knew. Until in 1577, he was caught then tortured into confessing 75 different acts of murder. Yeah, not even Dahmer or Bundy were putting up those type of numbers. Anyways, he was so feared by the German people that the locals actually believed that he was a powerful, dark magician who was controlled by the devil himself. Or herself. And honestly, they probably should have been even more scared of this guy because Niers somehow found a way to escape being in prison, despite being one of the most wanted men in the damn city. Also, he could continue doing what he loves, which is, you know, killing people. Can't hate the guy for doing what he loves. I mean, I'm out here doing the same thing. Not like that. I get to draw poorly drawn education videos for the coolest 978 people on the goddamn planet. Subscribe. Anyways, Peter's freedom didn't last too long because he was later captured again, where he confessed to 544 total murders and even admitted to cannibalism. Yeah, this dude was out here eating people up. But yes, he went from 75 kills to 544 kills in the time that he was out in the wild. What I was kind of scared to share with you guys was out of the 544 people he murdered, 24 of them were fetuses that he cut out of pregnant women. He then used the fetuses to perform magical rituals, or he would just eat them. Yeah, you heard me correctly, eat them. Listen, if it makes you feel better, this man got exactly what he deserved. Because the Germans made sure that he experienced one of the most painful, grueling executions of all time. Before the execution though, they put Niers through 3 days of torture. On the first day, pincers were used to tear strips of flesh from all over his body, where hot oil was then poured into those wounds. Ouch. On the second day, his feet were smeared with hot oil and held over hot coals, so that his feet would burn until only his bones were showing. On the third day, he was tied to wooden stakes on the ground, where the Germans then took a large iron-rimmed wagon wheel and hovered it over him, then proceeded to smash it down on Niers a total of 42 times, until his bones were crushed from his hands all the way down to his feet. A painful way to die, don't you think? You want to know an execution that was even more painful than the death of Peter Niers? It's the execution of a man named Mithridates back in 401 BC. Because out of every execution I'm going to talk about in this video, this one is by far the most disgusting and nastiest way to kill someone. Yes, even more disgusting than having peasants eat your flesh or getting your skin ripped off and then having burning hot oil poured onto it. Basically, there was a king named Artaxerxes II who ruled over the Achaemenid Empire, and he wanted Mithridates to kill his younger brother Cyrus. Why did he want to kill his own brother? Because Cyrus wanted to overthrow the king and claim the throne all for himself. After Mithridates slaughtered Cyrus for the king, he was then asked to keep it all a secret so that the king could tell everyone that in fact he killed his own brother, so that no one else in the empire would challenge his rule again. Yes, he really killed his own brother just to prove a point to everyone else. Now you're probably wondering, if Mithridates did exactly what he was asked to do, then why am I talking about him in this video? Well, one night Mithridates had a little bit too much to drink at a feast, and he went around and told everyone that he in fact murdered Cyrus with his own hands, not the king. Let's just say the king wasn't too happy because when he heard about the betrayal, he immediately sentenced Mithridates to death. Which is where I now get to tell you about this juicy, gut-wrenching execution that was drawn up to straight perfection. First, 2 canoes were carved so that they would fit together, where Mithridates was then stripped booty butt naked and was forced into one of them in the middle of the lake. Oh, and I forgot to mention that he was smeared from head to toe with milk and honey before being bound to the canoe. Yeah, you heard me correctly, milk and honey. The other boat was then secured over him so that his hands, feet, and head stuck outside of the 2 canoes, but he couldn't move. Doesn't sound too bad yet, right? Just a side note that I forgot to mention earlier, Mithridates was trapped like this on the lake for days on end. And the milk and honey that they poured on him started to rot, which led to insects biting, stinging, and leeching off his body. But apparently there wasn't enough insects smothering him because just a week later, the top boat was removed and he was again smeared with milk and honey. Just a quick side note for, you know, anyone wondering, Mithridates was forced to lick the rotten milk and honey off his own body. That's just nasty. Now you've probably been wondering this whole time what happens when he wants to go to the bathroom. Well, he has to urinate and defect all over himself in the boat for days and days on end. Now that there was urine, defect, rotten milk, honey all stuck onto him, it attracted so many insects that it actually covered Mithridates' whole body. Like you actually couldn't see him under all the bugs. Wait, it doesn't stop there. Because the insects began to enter his body and nest inside of him, laying eggs that eventually started hatching. Like they were deadass putting babies inside of him. Not like that, not like that. Anyways, we didn't even get to the best part yet. The bugs multiplied so fast that the vermin ate through his entire eyeball. Not just one of them, but both of his eyeballs. Delightful, wouldn't you agree? And the bugs were multiplying so fast that they were actually able to destroy his sinuses from the inside. How sick is that? Apparently this whole execution lasted for a total of 17 days. All of this just because Mithridates had a little bit too much to drink at a party. Somehow, I still think that this next execution was even more painful than getting your eyeballs eaten by a bunch of insects. So let me tell you about the execution of Robert Francois Damons in the year 1757. By the way, I love how this execution ends because it's hilariously cruel, I'm telling you. Anyways, before we get ahead of ourselves, let me give you a quick rundown of what Damons did in the first place to get himself executed. One day, King Louis XV, who, by the way, was the king of France at the time, was leaving the palace of Versailles one afternoon when Damons charged through his bodyguards and stabbed the king right in the chest with a small penknife. And sadly, the king was barely wounded because the blade only penetrated his chest by half an inch. Quick side note for anyone who might find this funny, King Louis XV actually called for a confessor after he was stabbed to admit to his wife that he's been having multiple affairs. Ooh, you dirty dog. Anyways, back to the main plot, the parliament convicted Damons and he was then tortured for 4 straight hours. But it was the way they decided to torture him that was just straight elegant. First, his legs and feet were crushed into wooden boots. Not bad so far, right? Well, after, the French used red-hot pincers to tear off his flesh one section at a time. Once most of his skin was off, they decided to pour molten lead and boiling hot oil right into his open wounds. Okay, hold on, just take a second to actually imagine how painful that was. Anyways, while Damons was screaming in agony, they decided to burn his right hand with scorching hot molten sulfur. Oh, and it doesn't even stop there because the parliament then handed Damons over to the royal executioner, Charles Sanson, where he somehow devised an execution that was even more painful than anything I've mentioned to you up until this point. Sanson grabbed Damons and dragged him into the middle of the Place de la Grève. Why'd he change the scenery? So that hundreds of people could witness this gruesome execution, where each of his hands and legs were then tied to the end of 4 different horses. And I think you know where this is going. Wait, I forgot to mention that Sanson sliced off Damons' genitals before tying him up. Isn't that bloody awesome? Anyways, the 4 horses were then forced to pull in 4 different directions so that his arms and legs would rip right out of their sockets. But somehow, Damons' joints were holding up and he was still able to be in one piece. Our boy Sanson started to get a little bit angry, so he walked over to Damons and sliced deeply into his armpits and groin to make the horses' jobs easier. In some twisted way, it's kinda thoughtful, don't you think? After the horses were able to rip Damons' arms and legs right off, leaving the dude with just a torso. I mean, they deadass made the man into a chicken nugget. Now, here's where the story takes a little bit of a turn. Yep, we aren't done just yet. This chicken nugget was somehow still alive even after getting his flesh torn off, getting molten lead and oil poured onto him, getting his genitals sliced off, and getting his arms and legs brutally ripped out of him. Don't ask, I don't even know how that's possible. Well, now the royal executioner looked like an idiot in front of hundreds of people for not being able to kill the man, because it was deadass's job, you know, the only thing he had to do. So Sanson decided to just throw him into a pit of fire where Damons just burned to death. Boo, boring. Next, we have the execution of Balthasar Gerard. Okay, again, let me give you some background information on this guy so you understand why he died. This dude, Gerard, was a trained assassin. So you would think that he was really good at killing people, right? Wrong. Let me explain. One of Gerard's assignments was to assassinate the Dutch Prince William. And for anyone that was curious, it was the year 1584. Just a random side fact. Anyways, one day Prince William was having dinner in his home when he decided to walk downstairs real quick.
when Gerard secretly followed behind him and fired one of 2 pistol bullets right through his chest. And the prince collapsed and died right on the spot. So what could possibly go wrong here? Well, when Gerard was running away, his dumbass accidentally tripped over some rubbish and was caught by the guards. No, seriously, I wouldn't even be talking about this story if this man could run properly. Anyways, after he was caught, the court ordered that Gerard be tortured for 3 straight days before his execution. And let's just say, I think he would have rather died instantly, because the torture they put Gerard through is probably the most brutal thing I've ever read on the internet. Like, seriously. On the first day, he was hung up with his hands tied behind him on a pole and then was raised and dropped over and over again, dislocating his shoulders. Not that bad, right? Then he was brutally whipped with a bullwhip until his whole body was scarred. This is where things start to get a little bit juicy. They smeared his wounds with honey, then found a goat with the roughest tongue and forced it to lick the honey off of him. One problem though, the goat actually refused to lick Gerard. So what did they do, you're probably wondering? They just poured salt into his wounds. Do you guys think that that's where the famous quote comes from, or am I just being crazy? Anyways, that's a wrap for day 1. On day 2, he was hung up on the pole again, except this time there was 300-pound weights tied to each one of his big toes for 30 straight minutes. Ouch. Oh, did you think it just stopped there? Because they then took shoes that were made out of uncured leather and forced Gerard's feet into them, where they then lit a fire right under him. Quick science lesson before I continue, when leather is heated up, it actually starts to shrink. So the leather shoes contracted so much that it actually crushed the bones of his feet. And they just left the shoes on him for hours on end with the fire still lit under him. It gets worse because on the final day, they ripped the shoes off of Gerard, which by the way tore his cooked flesh right off. Then as Gerard was screaming in agony, they lifted his arms and took branding irons and pressed it right into his armpits. Wait, it doesn't stop there. His pectoral muscles were then cut out of him. Yes, they ripped this man's chest out. Just ruthless. But they made sure to rub his big wound with salt. Thoughtful, don't you think? Anyways, they then took pins and shoved it under all of his fingernails and toenails. They then put a shirt on him that was soaked in alcohol and burning bacon grease. Don't forget that this man's whole chest is torn wide open at this point. Yeah, imagine the pain. The title of this video was no joke. After pincers were used to continue to tear off more skin, then his right hand was burned off with a red hot iron. What did they not do to this guy is probably what you're thinking in your head right now. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it gets even more gruesome. Because after his hand was burned off, his belly button was ripped open, his intestines were ripped out, his genitals were sliced off, and his arms and legs weren't even a part of his body anymore. And guys, Gerard was still alive through all of this. So how did he finally die? They sliced his chest wide open, then snatched his heart out, then threw it into his face. Yeah, this video made me realize that there are some cruel and just sick people on this planet. Alright guys, let's talk about some of the worst genocides in human history. Let me first tell you about the genocide of the Falun Gong believers. This one's super fun because these people were getting their organs stolen from their bodies. Alright everyone, it's history time. So this is Falun Gong, which is a spiritual practice that involves meditation and exercises, centered around the principles of truthfulness and compassion. Sounds peaceful, doesn't it? Well, this practice spread super fast in the 1990s, leaving the Communist Party of China with only one choice: to eliminate Falun Gong completely. Yo, I sounded so ugly right there. Anyways, why did they want to eliminate them? Because they saw Falun Gong believers as an evil cult. Pretty much, they thought they were dealing with some demons. The Communist Party then turned to the media, the police, the army, families, basically everyone around, and tried to turn them against the evil cult. And all of these people I just named were now out to attack Falun Gong through, get this, death. Yeah, you heard me correctly. They wanted to kill these people because of their beliefs. Not the first time in history. And they might have done something that's actually worse than death. Because the Falun Gong believers were tortured and illegally imprisoned in re-education labor camps. Where in history, you know bad things happen in there, but they were forced to do hard labor, abusive psychiatric measures to try and brainwash them. And as I forgot to mention, literal organ harvesting.
Now here's where things took an evil turn, because apparently the Falun Gong were not actually being targeted because they were a cult, but because the Communist Party needed organ donors. So what better way to get organs than just snatching it out of innocent people against their will? I mean, I guess it is free. Anyways, there was an investigation from 2000 and 2005 that found that there were tens of thousands of organs used for the transplants. And well, you guessed it, it was later revealed that 65,000 of the Falun Gong believers were killed for their organs. So 65,000 Chinese citizens had their organs replaced with organs that were stolen from tortured victims. And the worst part about all of it is they didn't even know. Alright, now let me tell you about the genocide that involves a man slaughtering every single white man in a country. Yeah, you heard me correctly. Let me tell you about the all-black nation. So this is Jean-Jacques, who in 1804 wanted to kill every single remaining white European man in Haiti after the Haitian Revolution. And to give you some background information on the Haitian Revolution, it was basically a war over slavery, trying to abolish it in Saint-Domingue. How you said Saint-Domingo? Or as we all know it, Haiti. Okay, so now back to Jean-Jacques. Basically, Jean wanted to take revenge on the French for the slavery, but killing all of them seems a bit crazy, right? Well, despite Jean's crazy orders, the executions of the white Europeans were often not carried out by the black citizens. So what did our trusty man Jean do? Well, he traveled to each city in Haiti to make sure that the massacres were taking place. This guy is like a toxic ex-girlfriend, I swear. How did he get them to murder the white people is probably what you're wondering right about now. Well, to actually incite these violent riots, he reminded the black people that the French were barbarians and about the atrocities they committed against them. Get this, he also forced people that were unwilling to kill the French to take part in the killings, especially mixed race men. Why mixed race? It's because he didn't want the blame to be solely on the black population. As if adding mixed people was gonna make any of this better, like gosh. Alright, so now let's actually get into the killings. Jean ordered white men to be killed on the main street of each city so that everyone around could watch. Now chat, you're probably wondering, were only white men killed? Nope, this man would slaughter white women and children as well. But if it makes you feel any better, he would have them executed last. How thoughtful. Not only that, but he would also assault the woman, you know, sexually. And if they weren't brutally murdered on the streets, they would be forced to marry the black citizens under the threat of death. Oh guys, and the party's just getting started. Because not only were the former slave owners killed, the old plantations that the black citizens were forced to work on were burned to the ground. And local white-owned stores were ravaged for pieces. Yeah, everything was being destroyed in this city, or cities. And just by March alone, there were literally no white people left. Like in Port-au-Prince, I'ma pop the city name on the screen. One of the cities in Haiti, 800 white people, yes, 800 were brutally murdered on the streets. And over the course of 3 months, around 5,000 white people were slaughtered, practically eradicating them from the country. Quick side note that you might actually find interesting. In 1805, the Constitution of Haiti declared that all of the citizens were black. And get this, if you weren't black and somehow still alive, you couldn't own any property in Haiti, which might be one of the only times I've ever seen this in history. Like seriously, this is a total Uno reverse card. Alright, now let me tell you about a genocide where an entire tribe was wiped out by cannibal psychos. Yeah, I'm not even kidding about that one. But let me give you some context so, you know, you're not confused. Basically, these are the Maori people who were the indigenous Polynesian people of New Zealand. These Maori people have lived here for about 800 years, well, until about 500 years later, a small group of these Maori people migrated to a nearby island and renamed themselves Moriori. No, seriously, look at these two names, I'm about to pop it up on the screen, like they're almost identical. Okay, so now you're probably wondering, why did they move to a new island? Well, their only goal was literally living in total peace. This was mainly because after bloody tribal fights, which were led by the original Maori people, the high-ranking chief of the Maori, hold on, I don't know how to say this name, I think you say Nunku Wanua, but I'm just gonna pop it up on the screen right here, would introduce them to a new philosophy called Nunku's Law. Not a really creative name, but I mean, I guess it works. This law became key to the new Moriori culture, meaning they were total pacifists. And for my slower box heads watching this video, that basically means no killing, no violence, and no fighting at all. Like seriously, they refused violence against anyone or anything. In fact, the Moriori were so peaceful that in 1791, when a British ship would somehow end up on the island. Wait, I forgot to mention that this new island was called Chatham Island. Anyways, one of the elders of the new tribe would be shot dead by the British ship's crew. The Moriori's response? Well, they thought the now dead man was partly at fault for the shooting. Yeah, talk about some understanding people. Anyways, let's get into these fun killings. So in 1835, the Maori, which is, the original tribe, would set sail to the Chatham Islands. And just as you expect, the Moriori, or the new people, would be super welcoming of their old people. The old people actually came in 2 different waves, adding up to around 900 Maori overall. Hold on, wait until I tell you how these old people were coming onto this new island. The Maori would come in a hijacked European ship, where the foreigners or Europeans that came in contact with the tribe would, get this, be eaten alive. Yeah, that one's not a joke. And the Maori people decided to steal the Europeans' advanced guns and even some clubs and axes. So great, the psychos now have weapons, and I think you know where I'm going with this. Also, side note here, even though the Moriori people, aka the new people, were super peaceful and nice to the old people still chose to kill and hang a 12-year-old girl that was from the new tribe. Anyways, the second wave of invaders would come at the end of the same year. It was the year 1835 for anyone that forgot already. Here's where the fighting began. The old people, or the people that just came on the island, demanded that the elders of the Moriori surrender their land to them. The 1,000 elders of the new tribe would then arrange a council meeting to come up with a game plan for this invasion. Now, me personally, if some of my old guys come into my island talking about they want to claim my land, we putting up a fight for sure. Also, hold on, keep in mind that the new people outnumbered the invaders 2-1. So they had doubled the people. Basically, they had a very good chance of protecting their land, so you would expect them to fight the invaders off, right? Well, ladies and boxheads, you're very wrong. The elders vowed to remain peaceful, or in other words, they didn't do jack squat. And the invaders obviously saw this as an act of war somehow, which led to 300 Moriori people being instantly slaughtered, with hundreds more being enslaved by the invaders, and get this. Around 10% of the population were killed using a gruesome ritual that the Maori invaders came up with. This ritual in particular involved staking out women and children on the beach. Yeah, they were dead, and they were left there to bleed for several days until they were finally dead. Some of the other Moriori people were forced to urinate and defect all over their sacred sites to, disrespect their new culture. Also, I don't know if I said defect right. Is it defect or defect? I don't know. And the invaders forced the people to never speak the new Moriori language, so the language actually died itself. In the end, 1,500 Moriori people were murdered between the invasion in 1835 and the release of the Moriori people from the slavery in 1863. That means there were only 101 of the new people surviving. And get this, we're not stopping right there. These survivors were then forced to intermarry with the Maori invaders to wipe them out completely. And thanks to the Western diseases, the last pure-blooded Moriori died in 1933. Now, how can anything be worse than having your own people be the reason your whole bloodline's eliminated? Actually, I can tell you what's worse. We're about to hit 10,000 subscribers and you're sitting here, you haven't hit subscribe yet. That's worse. Now, this next genocide is so fun because the guy who was killing everyone, get this, believed he was the son of God that was sent to kill off China and reform it. Yeah, I'm being serious about this. But real quick, let me give you like a minute of context. Just a minute. The rebellion, as it was called, began under Hong Shuchan, the wacko I just told you about, by the way, between the years 1814 and 1864. And he was a civil service candidate who, after learning about Christianity, claimed he had a series of visions that showed him that he was the son of God and the brother of Jesus Christ. Yes, this dude really believed that he was the son of God. Delusional, don't you think? His close friend at the time, Feng, used Hong's ideas of reforming China to organize a new religious group, known as the God Worshippers Society, or better known as the Hong Worshippers. Now you're probably wondering, what was his great ideas? Well, it was actually for everyone to share property equally, for women and men to have equal power in society, and for there to be no more drugs such as tobacco, alcohol, and everything of the sort. This attracted many famine-stricken peasants, workers, and miners to join the group. And Hong took these group of people, led them into a rebellion, where they swept across China and claimed the city of Nanjing. Well, he actually renamed the city Taiping Tanguo. Guys, for the love of God, I'm just a boxhead. How do you expect me to pronounce this correctly? Please, tell me how you expect me to do that. Alright, but anyways, this man deadass took a bunch of peasants and low-class workers, turned them into badass warriors, and took over the damn capital of China. Yeah, this is gonna be one good story, just wait. By the way, it was estimated that there were over 1 million soldiers fighting for Hong, so this wasn't no little party or anything. And listen, no one could stand in the way or even question Hong's rebellion. No, seriously, when Yang Shuping, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, claimed that God wanted Hong dead, Yang was beheaded and his family members were all brutally slaughtered too. Wait, get this. The general who actually executed Yang was then ordered to be killed because Hong believed his ego was way too big. If you think that's stupid, just remember Hong believed everyone was exactly equal. That was kind of his motto. Now, ladies and boxheads, how did this rebellion actually end? In 1860, the Hong worshippers tried taking over Shanghai, where they were then stopped by the Western-trained Victorious Army, which is a super cool name, I've got to say. Anyways, by 1862, the Qing government, with the help of the French and British forces, surrounded Nanjing and put an end to the rule of Hong and his followers. Get this, the rebellion was said to have claimed the lives of 20 to 30 million people. To put that into some perspective, that's the size of Texas. Yeah, I mean, why couldn't they have just taken Texas? Wait, this is where the story starts to get actually funny. Hong himself, or the Son of God as we like to call him, refused to flee the city during the collapse, so instead he just unalived himself. Not before leaving his 15-year-old son in charge of the whole rebellion, leaving him to take all of the blame. Oh guys, hold on, it gets better. He was soon to be executed by the Qing government, all because of his dad. Wanna know how the soldiers of Hong died? Well, after the capture of Nanjing, 100,000 of the soldiers all preferred to be killed rather than remaining imprisoned or being forced to convert. Now, have you heard about the Cambodian genocide? Where it was believed that killing around 4 million people would build a communist utopia. Yup, it's time for a bit of context. In 1975, a radical communist group named Khmer Rouge, led by dictator Pol Pot, successfully conquered the countryside of Cambodia and even the capital city. Now here's where things get a little bit fun. Pol Pot declared the year 1975 Year Zero. What the hell does Year Zero mean? Is probably what you're wondering. Well, Year Zero meant that Cambodia would be totally isolated from the outside world, and the society was to be remade with communist ideals. Now, you may be asking, why totally isolate Cambodia? Well, the new government believed that society had been corrupted by the exposure to the West and needed to destroy any evidence of Western influence. Oh, we're just getting started. After the takeover, civil rights and property rights were immediately taken away from all citizens. Oh, and any display of religion was banned too. Basically, the goal was to create a utopia. Yeah, I don't really know how everyone having no rights is a utopia, but anyways, cities were then emptied with citizens being forced to work hopeless agricultural jobs in the killing fields. And can you guess why they called it that? Well, that's because these agricultural jobs led to many people being overworked, starved, or even straight up executed. Only if they messed up though, I think. Causing over 1.7 million people to die in these fields, hence the name. Foreign minorities were also straight up hunted under the new regime. This was mostly Chinese and Vietnamese or just Muslim people, with around 80% of the Muslim population being decimated. Here's where things get funny, if I can even say that. Anyone who worked as a doctor, lawyer, or teacher or get this, wore glasses were straight up murdered as well. Yup, you could literally be killed just for wearing glasses. Why? Because Pol Pot thought that any intellectuals would wear glasses, so they needed to be eliminated. Remember, this is a communist group. Everyone has to be equal. And like you would expect, people started to flee to Thailand to escape death. Except this man Pol Pot caught on to what these guys were trying to do. And if you were suspected of being a traitor, you were also slaughtered, even if these people had zero evidence on you. And thousands of people were eliminated this way. Finally, after 7 years, the Cambodians were finally set free from the pothead, because the Vietnamese invaded Cambodia and put an end to Khmer Rouge's wrath. Now, the death counter was somewhere around 3 million, maybe even less than that. Just to put that into some perspective, Cambodia only had a population of 7.5 million people. Yeah. And listen, at least they didn't get away with it, but if you want to hear about mass murderers that got away with it, click this video right here where I talk about serial killers who may still be killing today. And you dumb boxhead, do not forget to hit that subscribe button.